Welcome to Doctors at Work. My name's Matt Daniel, and this podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. Today's topic is about how to succeed as international medical graduate and how we can better support international medical graduates. In this episode, Ibifunke tells me about some of the challenges faced by doctors moving to a new country. Extensive preparation to understand the new system and new ways of working is key. But doctors moving to a new country are not a homogenous group, and those welcoming them need to understand them as individuals with specific skills and experiences. There needs to be a mindset shift to seeing new starters, whether they're international or not as liabilities, but as assets bringing a new range of experiences and ideas with them. Those of us that are welcoming doctors new to the UK should take responsibility for how we impact others, and organisations can also focus not just on upskilling the international graduate, but also on helping existing staff understand their unconscious biases. Welcome, Ibifunke. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for having me. So as you see, my name is Ibifunke. I'm a graduate from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana. So I was an international medical student. I'm now an international medical graduate in the UK. And in between, I worked in Nigeria as well. So I've got experience of those three systems, as well as other work that I've done in between. I'm a Higher Surgical Trainee now based in Dundee. And I'm a mom, as well as a wife, sister, and lots of other things in between.
You're busy, and you didn't mention that you also run a program supporting international medical graduates as well in your spare time.
Yes, indeed.
And I invited you to talk today about how we can support international medical graduates when they are moving country. And an advantage of being a doctor is that it's a very portable career. Everyone needs doctors, and that gives all of us the opportunities to go and live and work in different countries. And I wonder maybe if we could start right at the beginning. Say that you are a doctor wherever you're based, and you're wondering potentially going to live in a different country. What kind of things should a doctor be thinking about before moving?
I think so. Depending on how people's journeys go, there are different degrees of preparation, and I think the most important thing is being prepared. So in my journey, why I'm able to do what I do was because I didn't prepare. I had been in the UK doing a master's degree in international health management, and then I left to do an internship in Philips, went back to Nigeria. And when I decided to come back to the UK, it was just a decision I made sort of off the cuff and went with it. So there wasn't that time to prepare, ask questions, find out about the place I was moving to, the job. I just thought it was something I'd been doing. I was a doctor in Nigeria, I'd be a doctor in the UK. I spoke English, so I didn't think I would have any challenges. But I think that was a big mistake on my part. And that's something that I think is really crucial for anybody who's moving to a different place to practice. There needs to be preparation. And that preparation is not only from the career perspective in terms of the new job you're going to do, but it's the new system. How does it work? And some of that information isn't readily available online. Things have changed a lot, especially in the UK from when I first moved, in terms of the support and the information that's available. There's now very granular information that's available. So people need to be aware of that, and they need to engage with those messages that are out about what the system is like, what a day in the life is like, what to expect at work, the challenges people face, so that you come in aware of what you're coming into, and then you're able to navigate better. There are less shocks to your system, because moving is a big deal. You leave behind your support system, you leave behind everything you've accomplished, you leave behind your confidence and the knowledge of your name. As a doctor, your name carries a lot of weight. So lots of people who've worked with you, who know your name, who know what you're capable of, you're leaving that behind to create a new sort of system for yourself. So the most important thing to do is to make yourself aware of what that transition is going to mean for you. And the way to go about that is to prepare yourself by using the materials that are out there and reaching out to people to find out what the new system you're moving into is like.
I think that certainly that idea that the system is different, not necessarily the medicine, that very much resonates with me. If I think when I worked in Australia, and you pretty much you take tonsils out for the same conditions in not quite the same way, but in very similar way. But I always remember, for me, it was things like there's a consultant or attending, as they're called in Australia, for example. They just come there and they're there for one day and then they disappear. And, you don't see the same consultant until the following week because they're only in that hospital one day. The other thing also that I vividly remember was the cost of medication, because there, unlike UK, people pay for medication. So all of a sudden, all of these things that in UK I was prescribing willy-nilly, totally oblivious to how much the patient had to pay. Then when I remember prescribing ciprofloxacin eardrops to a patient, and and the patient came back saying, how much are these eardrops? And I kind of very quickly had to think, okay, can I get away with something that's cheaper? And can you give me some examples from your experiences where stuff that you would never have realized would matter but actually do?
One of the things I like to talk about is race relationships. So I had kind of experienced a difference when I came for my master's. It may sound silly, but that was the first time I realized I was Black, because when in my country, everybody's Black. So there's nothing special about being Black. It's just what you are. So you don't talk about it. You don't think about it. And growing up, you consume media from all over the world, but the media does not necessarily, it doesn't teach you about the fact that people will treat you differently. Mm-hmm. So I got into work in the NHS in a culture where, number one, new people were not particularly welcome. And then number two, there wasn't a lot of experience of working with international medical graduates. So I struggled with that because I was coming from a system where I had worked for over 5 years. I was confident the people I worked with knew me. They knew my capabilities, and I sort of carried that with me, expecting to come into a system that would recognize that, because clearly I had my qualifications and I had got this job. So of course I'm capable of doing the job, but that wasn't necessarily the sort of interactions I was having. So that was very difficult for me to navigate, because I didn't understand what was happening and I couldn't relate with it. So I didn't know what to do. And as you do when you're faced with conflict, you sort of push back without understanding. So I think one of the things I learned was the reasons behind that, those interactions I was having. And because I could then understand it from the perspective of a lack of experience of relating with someone like me, I could then teach my friends who were coming across how to navigate those relationships and not find themselves in those conflict situations. And once they had better lives and relationships, I recognized that this was something that was learnable. So if international medical graduates could understand that this was what was going to happen in the system and could behave in ways that would push that confrontation, that conflict away, and enable them to have better relationships at work, which is obviously better for their well-being, better for their patients, better for everybody, then that was something to look into and to propagate. So that was one of the things that led to writing the book. It was, if you have all this information about what the system is like, what to expect in one place, and you can prepare by reading that book, then you'll have a much better experience of work when you start. So that's the kind of thinking that I hope that most international medical graduates have when they start. It's the fact that you can control how people relate with you once you're prepared for the new system that you're coming into.
And how did you deal with this idea? You were an established doctor already. You already had credibility. You'd already proven yourself. You already had the name that was recognized that somebody was good at what you do. And then all of a sudden, you go to a different system, and and not only do people not know you, but also people treat you as as I don't know, people assume presumably that you don't know anything because you've just arrived. Yeah. So, I mean, how do you deal with that?
I think the important thing about that is to be confident in your capacity. So once I knew that I could do my job and I was doing my job well, so I just continued to do that. I did my job well. And I was really fortunate because my own team where I worked, because as an SHO in that trust, we cross-covered. So in my own team where I worked, I had amazing support and my consultants recognized that I was delivering in the way I was expected to. So even where I had situations where people tried to say that I wasn't competent, I wasn't capable, I had my consultants saying, no, actually, she is.
Mhm.
So I think just focusing on the fact that you are good, like you didn't get here by chance. And you talked about this when we had our last meeting as well, is that recognition of I am capable, I'm not here by chance, and just sticking to it and working hard. There are always going to be things that you don't know. There are always going to be things you can improve on. And once you can see your gaps and you work on those gaps and you keep consistently delivering, people are going to recognize that and people are going to honor that.
Mhm. Another advantage that I would foresee is that if you do change systems, then actually the system that the international doctor is used to, that system might be better than the new system they operate in. So, there's an assumption that the international doctor has to adapt to their new system, but actually maybe the new system could learn something from that doctor's experiences elsewhere.
Yes, I think that's an advantage that is probably not recognized yet in the system that we work in the NHS, because the presumption is that we've all come from places that are worse off. And that's why we've come to the UK, which in many senses is probably true. But there are lots of things that are done differently. That if there were platforms for learning where people were actually open to hearing about things, I certainly have worked with theatre managers in Nigeria that are very frugal. And I look at some of the practices here and I think they would cringe at the some of the wastefulness of it. So those are things that there are opportunities for learning, but I don't think the system is at the point where it's open to that sort of learning, to bringing in information from how you do things in other places, because there's the presumption that this is universally the better system.
Yeah, yeah. There's something there about. I mean, maybe I know the UK system because that's where I work, but we always think that we're the best sort of in UK, or we always think that the NHS is the best, and the I'm lucky enough to have done my fellowship in Australia, so at least I know one other healthcare system, and I didn't grow up in UK, and I talk to lots of people from all over the world. And we do have a lot to learn, and certainly one of the things that I always notice is I think in UK, at least in surgical training, because both of us are surgeons, in the UK surgical training, people are very good at doing clinics, and people are very good at decision making, and people are very good at thinking about what they're going to do. In some of the for some of the doctors from other systems that I know, they're perhaps not as good as that clinical decision making, but they're brilliant at operating in a way that that maybe some of the UK trainees do not quite get the same amount of practical hands-on experiences. And again, if I take that sort of out of the surgical world, if I think of doctors, doctors that do or have done A&E in South Africa, for example, yeah, and sort of somebody does A&E, or works as a generalist in a rural hospital, and by the time that they've done 6 months of that in a rural hospital, they will have done, as much practical procedures as people many years, the seniors. Not necessarily, they won't necessarily have gone through the thinking, the analyzing, the evidence base, but in terms of the practical skills, they will have had that. So it always feels like we can learn from each other. Does that sort of sound fair?
I think so. And I think in particular, I like the fact that you talked about the thinking in the UK, because that's something that's is different from my experience. So there's the way the UK system works from the time you're in medical school, and I interact with the medical students, so I've seen it, that, at the beginning of the problem, you've thought your way through to the end of it, the steps, the things that need to happen. And that's not necessarily because not all those things will necessarily be available in where an international medical graduate has come from. And the thought process, I'll use the easiest thing, for example, blood gas analysis. For me as a Nigerian, when we're dealing with an unwell patient in a Nigerian hospital, a blood gas analysis does not always feature in decision making. You see an unwell patient, you work out what the problem is, and you manage the patient without using a blood gas analysis. In the UK system, if I'm dealing with an unwell patient and I haven't done a blood gas analysis, I look like I haven't begun to consider the fact that the patient is unwell. And these are tiny things that are different, and it takes time for an IMG to become familiar with, because for an IMG, the steps are not the same. So it's coming to understand the steps, coming to be able to repeat the steps every time. Those are the things that take time. And from the point of view, because we talked about this at the beginning, from the point of view of supporting international medical graduates, it's recognizing that just because I haven't coded all those steps, it doesn't mean I'm not looking after the patient or I'm not competent to look after the patients. It just means that maybe today I'm slower than I was yesterday. Maybe this was a night shift, and because I have to think about these things, I haven't put those things, I haven't done them because these things slip up. So it's giving that grace to understand that this person is from a different system, and this person is not always thinking as quickly as I am, or hasn't done this as many times as I have. So it's giving people the grace and talking through things without the feeling being passed on that that person is incompetent or that person is not knowledgeable. So that grace, allowing that grace to allow people to grow and get settled into the way of doing things and repeatedly doing things in the same way.
I hope you're enjoying the show. Please click subscribe so you'll be notified when new episodes become available. This podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. You can be part of that mission too by forwarding this show to one person who you think might benefit from listening. Thank you. Now on with the show. If we think of a system, whether it's a GP surgery or a hospital, and there's a doctor that's new to a new country, let's sort of say new to UK because that's the system that we know. What does good corporate level induction look like? What should a hospital put on for doctors that are new to UK that would set them up for success?
I struggle with the fact that the emphasis is on the IMG. So what has happened over the years is there's a perception that the problem is the international medical graduate. So the international medical graduate has to be inducted. The international medical graduate has to be taught the ways and things. And I think that's good. But I think there needs to be a shift in focus to training the hospitals, the departments, the staff in how to interact with international medical graduates. Because what I find quite interesting is international medical graduates is an umbrella term that covers people from even UK people who've trained abroad. And regardless of where this person is from, this umbrella term creates the perception that that person is somehow less because they don't know the ways of the UK system. And that's fine because the system is different. But I think what is also consistent is that there is a culture that treats international medical graduates in a way that makes them seem to consistently fall short, regardless of where they've come from. And I think that system is the one that needs to be broken down. And I think that training needs to come to the wider community of the NHS so that we can break down that system and we can start to treat each other in ways that are respectful of the fact that every single doctor that's coming to this country has passed medical school somewhere and has passed the GMC's licensing requirements at whatever stage. So that person is not a random individual coming in. And that said, the culture is not just, it's not just international medical graduates who get treated like this. It's anyone who's new in the NHS. So I see new consultants who've come from other hospitals. I see the way they sort of start and the way their personas are at the beginning and how that transforms when they've been there for somewhat longer. New secretaries, anybody who's new gets treated like this, but it's more difficult for the international medical graduates because they're also dealing with a lot more in their lives. So I think there needs to be a system and cultural shift in the way people who are new to the system, to the country, are treated in general in the NHS.
So it's a mindset shift from, and actually you're right about, new consultants to a new department, new secretary. It doesn't even have to be an international graduate, does it? But so there's a kind of, there's an assumption this person's new, they're a liability. Yeah, sort of, that's kind of how we think, and that assumption should change to, this person's new, aren't we lucky that they've joined our team? They're going to have a wealth of experience, they're going to try really, really hard, and they might need a little bit of additional support for a short period of time, but they're going to bring a whole wealth of experience from elsewhere, and aren't we lucky to have the benefits that they've joined our team? So that kind of totally different way of viewing people. And you're right, actually, it's not just about an international graduate, is it? It's it's okay. So how do we make that shift?
I think we need to talk about it more. So at the moment, there's a lot of talk about induction for international medical graduates. There's a lot of focus, there's lots of help available for international medical graduates. But I don't think I don't hear anybody else talking about the fact that this is a culture. And it's particularly important now that we're facing workforce challenges where people are leaving the NHS because of the culture within the NHS. People are citing the culture. People who are living younger, we're losing consultants, we're losing nurses, we're bleeding staff from every aspect of the NHS. So I think we need to be talking about the culture more, particularly because there are people who are trained to design cultures in organizations. So it's not a problem that cannot be solved. We just need to actually talk about it, recognize that it's a problem, and do something about it. So I think we need to talk about the fact that this is a problem. It's the elephant in the room. Nobody talks about the fact that there's a cultural problem in the NHS, and it doesn't matter. I've worked in 3 hospitals, or I've been employed by 3 trusts across all the hospitals they cover in England. I'm now in Scotland. It's the same. It's the same. So it's an NHS-wide problem that I think we need to be talking about. It's the elephant in the room. Nobody's talking about the fact that the culture is the problem and the culture needs to change. And there are people who can help with that. So I think talking about it more is probably the first step.
I think one of the things that always comes up for me when we talk about culture and system is culture is you and I. Yeah, system is you and I. And I think there's always a challenge to blame others, and certainly, I mean, I still do that, and probably have done that enormously, sort of, for a large chunk of my career, blaming somebody else for the culture, and saying, it's nothing to do with me, it's everybody else's fault. And I think that happens a lot, yes, or certainly I used to do that, and I think I hear a lot of people say that. But the reality is that you and I are the system, and you and I are the culture, and if all of us took responsibility and sort of said, okay, these are the things that I can do, and none of us are perfect, and none of us are going to get it right, and and all of us have days when we're miserable, and low and depressed and stressed, all of us have that. But if all of us made a concerted effort to notice what we're doing and to notice the impact that we have on the people around us, then that's how things would change, isn't it? Yeah. And if I treat three people better than I normally do, then those three people are going to have a good day, and they're going to treat three people better than they normally do, and each of those nine people is going to treat three people better than they normally do, and and before you know it, sort of that kind of ripple permeates. But but it starts with each one of us as individual taking ownership of the impact that we have on other.
I agree with what you're saying in terms of each of us need to do better. But what I've realized over the years with being an IMG and working in systems is it's the thing that people say when we talk about unconscious bias, we forget that the word unconscious means that the person does not realize what they're doing. So somebody is saying something to me, somebody is saying, for example, to me, your name is really long and I can't see that. And that person is completely oblivious to the impact that has had. If I've stepped up to a podium to ask a question, and the first thing the person who's responding to me is saying is, you can't say my name, that already does something to my nervous system. This is in addition to me being at the podium. Does this impact the way I behave the next time I want to ask a question? So there's lots of things that happen that people are not aware of. So the reliance on people to do better, to improve the system may take a lot longer because there's a lot happening where people are not aware of the impact of what they're saying, what they're doing. And it's very simple things, ignoring people, not, it's simple things. People, you hear people teaching people things like make eye contact with everyone during a ward round. And you would expect that that's something that people would know. Like, why are you not making eye contact with the doctors that you're going on the ward round with? But there are people who will go on ward rounds and completely ignore international medical graduates who are there with them, or when they speak, will not respond to them. And it's little things like that. And these are not things that you can keep talking about and keep raising your voice about, because then you become the person that's always creating discomfort and people become uncomfortable around you. So there are little things like that. And until we're able to support each other in a way that allows us to learn that there are behaviors that are not acceptable and behaviors that are, which is where the support of an organizational level shift in culture comes in. I've read about trusts that do 100-day interviews to ask how people are getting on. How's that fed back into the system? How does that change the system? But something that comes sort of from the top down and then from the bottom up, so that it all meets in the middle somewhere and the well-being of staff is improved. Because at the end of the day, whilst international medical graduates are leaving the UK, they're not leaving as fast as the UK trained doctors. So there is a problem. There is a problem.
And so there's something there about the impact that we have on each other that people don't necessarily know, and actually that as an idea, if I think the impact that I have on the people around me, whether that's international graduates or somebody else, that that is really important to me, yeah, and to everybody else. Anybody else that's listening will hopefully agree that the impact they have on other people, that's really important, whether that's an international graduate or somebody else. Yeah. And you said that there's this broad umbrella term, international medical graduate, but that ranges from somebody who's brand new to healthcare to somebody who is a 50-year-old senior GP consultant that changes countries. How are their experiences different?
I think the senior clinicians have it better because they come in at a level where they're not as challenged in their daily lives as the junior doctors are. So for the junior doctors, you get flack from every direction. So from your colleagues, your seniors, from non-medical professionals, there's just things that you have to deal with and learn to deal with that come from every direction. And sometimes the junior doctor isn't necessarily a junior doctor. They're just starting, they're just starting at the junior level in the NHS. So it can be quite challenging for more junior doctors, in my opinion. That being said, my experiences of coming in as a junior doctor at this point, 8 years post-qualification. So it's a that's my experience. And interacting with more senior people, I think they don't have the same challenges as you do starting out more junior.
Okay. And maybe if I could bring us to a close, and if I can ask you to summarize, what would be your top tips for doctors that are thinking of moving to a different country, but also doctors that are welcoming doctors into their country?
So for doctors thinking of moving, my top tip would be prepare, and prepare before you start the job and prepare after you start the job. Don't try not to be found wanting. So if you're going to be at the clinic, be aware of who's coming to that clinic, what to expect in the clinic, and show up prepared. And find out about the country, the location, just preparation. I think in one word, preparation would be my top tip for someone moving to a new country. For doctors who are welcoming someone to a new country, recognize that there's no single story. So that person you're seeing is coming in with a lot of life that they've lived and a lot of experience that has come with that life. So recognize that and look at them beyond the title or the role that they've come into, and recognize that there's a person with a story behind that title, that job, that role, and treat them with the dignity that you would like to be treated.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.